The D-Reaper's backstory is also based on an actual historical event that is often overlooked, although this reference is not expanded upon enough to give this season any true social relevance. The animation of this season is probably the best, on par with Season 5. Although the characters themselves are average and do not really appear their age, the settings are done very well, and many of the Digimon from previous seasons are given a more feral look. The Digivolution sequences are probably the best of any season, even if the music is not improved. The Digivolution scenes for Renamon's higher forms are relatively not that impressive though, because they are the only ones that are not computer generated, giving them a sense of cheapness. Tamers, unfortunately, suffers from what is probably the blandest portrayal of the digital world. I understand that they were aiming for the look of a barren wasteland, but honestly, the wastelands at the end of Season 1 had a much more somber feel than the ones in Tamers. The final arc's animation, though, has a fitting, almost apocalyptic feel to it. Also, a prevalent animation pattern in other seasons, recycled footage, is not quite as prevalent in this season. Many people praise Tamers for its supposedly improved writing over previous seasons. This is a valid claim in many cases, mostly due to the integration of several science fiction elements that the previous seasons lacked, but also because Tamers did not really change much from the original as far as dialogue is concerned. The previous seasons did, though, so it is not really an inherent problem with those two. Most of the intelligent dialogue, honestly, comes from either the adults or Beelzemon, although even the main characters have their moments every now and then. Plot-wise, the writing of this season is lacking until near the two-thirds point of the season, and whereas the previous two seasons relied on old-fashioned storytelling, this season is this one relies too much on scattered bizarre happenings. Some believe that this season is better put together due to a lack of plot holes, but there are probably about as many scattered throughout Tamers as there are in other seasons. For example, there is no proper explanation given for why wild Digimon in the beginning have a desire to enter the real world, except maybe for Ice Devimon. This is a stark contrast from previous seasons, where Digimon in the real world either had a where the Digimon that were in the real world either had a motive or an explained reason for being there. How does Guilmon inherently know what goggles are, having been just born, and how does Calmon know what people are? Throughout the first half of the season, it is inconsistent whether Calmon is aware of his power to affect Digivolution. And at first, why does only Takato feel the pain his Digimon partner endures during battle? And how is Rio able to biomerge without the help of Dobermon? There are plenty more, but those are not necessary to convey the point. That said, though, I must say that I really like the attention to detail that this season has, with plenty of barely conspicuous references to previous episodes. I also like how the names of the Digimon are mostly better in this season, with plenty of mythological references. I mentioned in my review of Season 2 that Tamers does not achieve that balance point that many people claim it does. This is because Tamers, frankly, ends up taking itself too seriously on occasion, which really detracts from the viewing experience. What I mean by this is that because Tamers has such a relatively dark general tone, the negative effect of any moderately light-hearted episode or scene is greatly augmented. That is not to say that there aren't moments in Tamers that are appropriately serious, such as when the group gets a glimpse of the struggle in the digital world, which is one of my personal favorite scenes. The themes of Tamers are pretty heavy for a kids show, and include the ramifications of artificial intelligence, the definition of life, and the dangers of delving into uncharted territory with technology. These are demonstrated mostly by the actions and conversations among the former Monster Makers, the group that originally created the Digimon. Strangely enough, the theme of Destiny's nature, an important one for the final arc, is demonstrated almost entirely through Jerry, again making her significant despite her somewhat weak character. In fact, I fully acknowledge that the themes of this season are probably more advanced than those of previous seasons. However, they are not conveyed as well and are made to be more convoluted than they should have been. A fair amount of viewers seem to label Tamers the best season in the franchise only due to its darker tone, which is one of those things that I really think needs to stop.
Now here's something that I know needs to be addressed, so I will try to be as clear as possible. Darker is not synonymous with better. If everything already stated does not clarify that, then look at it this way. Consider two movies, THX 1138 and Star Wars, both directed by the same person. THX is incontrovertibly the darker of the two, much like Digimon Tamers, with heavier themes regarding politics and fundamental human nature, but is rather bland as a result. Now look at Star Wars Episode 4, which, much like Digimon Adventure, boasts a lighter tone and themes, and simpler plot that relies more on the classic conflict between good and evil. Yet it also contains memorable heroes, terrific villains, and imaginative settings. Ultimately, which one is better? No contest.
The regard for the Tamer Spawn movies has left me confused beyond belief. Only two movies were made for this season, and frankly, they are both terrible and do not merit their fan bases by any means. The first is Battle of Adventurers, which takes place during the Deva arc. Basically, Takato's vacation at his cousin's home is interrupted by the arrival of a strange girl that is being pursued by several Digimon. The main villain is Mephistomon, who seeks to set up his own world for no adequately explained reason, and it is up to the Tamers to defeat him. The problem with this, and the other movie, is the same as that of the season itself. The pacing is bad. This problem is even more glaringly obvious here, as it takes forever for anything interesting to happen, the character interactions are boring, and the final half is pretty much a series of badly paced, obscure fights. Inconsistencies in power level are abundant here, as both Guilmon and Kiwimon are able to individually defeat two ultimate level foes, which logically they should not be able to do. However, Mephistomon's appearance is quite terrifying, and it is a plus to see Omnimon again. The second movie is Runaway Locomon, which is basically the invasion of a train-shaped Digimon and a horde of parasitic creatures during Rika's birthday. Again, this movie is horribly paced and has little entertainment value. Some viewers appear to laud Rika's vision of her father, but this actually serves little purpose and never really leads to anything. The villains are as one-dimensional as possible, and the best characters are horribly underused. The fights are too rushed and anticlimactic. The only real plus is that Gallantmon Crimson Mode gets a chance to make up for his inept appearance in the final episodes. Ultimately, these two movies are nowhere near as good as the four that came before them. So, after all of this, one might reach the conclusion that I believe Tamers is an awful season. Actually, I think that Tamers is a really good season, and a fine addition to the franchise. However, it does have its own share of flaws, and I think it's unjustified that they go largely ignored, while the flaws of the other seasons are irrationally inflated. In conclusion, this season is the third best overall, and not as refined as its predecessors, but the gap between them is quite small, and Tamers is still miles ahead of the final two seasons.